Okay, at this time, we're going to go to reports, and this is for information only, and I think this is why most people are here tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Little, and Dr. Little, if you'll take it away.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I must say this is going to be a unique superintendent's update because there is a lot of things that I think many superintendents, if you would have said a year ago, you're going to have to be tackling these types of issues, it would be quite the surprise, and as it has been. Before we get started tonight, I do want to say some words that have really framed our efforts is we wanted to be purposeful, we wanted to be strategic, and we wanted to be intentional about our work. And our goal, and when you look across the board, our goal is to maximize face-to-face time and have a strong instructional program for our students. And at the same time, it's a both and for us, and at the same time, have a safe and secure environment to minimize risk for our employees, our students, and our community at large. And so there's been lots of work about this effort. Two of those people are back here, but I think they would even admit that we have had, really right now, it'd be too long a list to count about people who've been working on this plan and who have been a part of the work that we're doing. But Dr. Smith and Dr. Phillips are going to present tonight about where we're going. But again, I want you to keep the words in mind: purposeful, strategic, and intentional. And our goal is to maximize that face-to-face time while looking after the health and safety of our students, the adults in the building, and our community at large. So those are the big takeaways, the framing things that we've been working on. I would also say, I would be remiss to say, even that tonight we're calling this our plan, I think we're referring to it as our framework, with the knowledge and understanding that in the next month, the world could look differently. Look differently. Sorry, Melissa's gone already. She and I found out tonight, she and I both share the fact we both made a C in English 102. Just don't want to throw that out there to everybody. But the world could be a very different place in a month from now. And how that looks then at the beginning of school is still up in the air. But I am thankful for the people who worked on this, for the creative energy. We do have a number of those folks over there, and they may not want to raise their hand because they have to own some of this stuff. But I am thankful for their work, but it was really about a collective effort of bringing this together. And I think what you're going to see tonight are some solutions that really meet our community needs. So take it away, Dr. Smith.
So this evening I'll be presenting to you reentry schedule options for K-12 students here in Lexington County School District 1. To create these options, we convened a group of school administrators at each grade level, well, I should say grade band, from across the district to draft initial scheduling options for reentry. Members of individual divisions and departments across central services also supported our drafting team as we developed our plans and framework. Both the drafting team and central service administrators studied a number of reentry plans from across the country to inform our design. Once a first draft of schedules was produced, we asked for feedback from loads and loads of stakeholders across our district. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Phillips for a couple of minutes to discuss that process.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Is this working? Did I do it? Okay. So we did not act, the task force did not act in isolation. We did seek feedback from a variety of sources. We gathered feedback from many of our stakeholders, including parents, students, the medical community, teachers, nurses. We did used a variety of instruments. We used a pulse survey from Hanover Research, which we sent out to all parents and asked them to have students do it as well. We did it the same survey for school and district level staff. And we got up to almost 4,000 parents, 189 student responses, over 1,500 school level staff, and 174 district level staff on that. We did a lessons learned survey to try to get information from our stakeholders about how things went during the closure with regard to the remote learning process. And we focused those surveys on established groups within the district, like the Teacher Leadership Council and the Support Staff Advisory and some Central Services folks. Beyond that, Josh, I did it. There we go. Okay. After that, we also conducted focus groups with parents, doctors, students, teachers, nurses, and support staffs to show them some of the proposed models, get their feedback on how those can be improved upon. We also conducted a thought exchange, and many of you may have participated in that. Sort of a different approach, less of a survey and more of a virtual town hall where people could express their thoughts and then rate the thoughts of others. And what that allowed us to do was get those thoughts that were most popular sort of floated up to the top. And we had a tremendous response to that. 8,600 or so parents or guardians and 2,400 staff. And in the parents alone, we had over 300,000 ratings of comments. So that was some interesting data as well. And what came out of all of this feedback were basically two differing views. So we have a group of folks who are very, very concerned about returning to a face-to-face reopening because of the safety of students and staff. And then on the other side, you have those who have a desire to return to school as normally as possible with the inclusion of some reasonable precautions. What we found, though, is that there are areas in which both of those groups agree. And this is where we sort of focused a lot of our efforts and where things aligned. So if we are remote, folks believe that new learning must take place. It must be structured learning. So there needs to be some schedule, some structure to that instruction. We need clear communication about our plans and about expectations for students, for staff, etc. Any schedule that's developed needs to be reasonable and needs to have flexibility and options. So parents need to have the option of a remote or virtual learning experience, or a hybrid experience, or a face-to-face experience. And then, of course, cleaning and hygiene and sanitization of all the buildings and equipment. They also agreed that we needed to take efforts to manage teacher workload because we're asking teachers to do a lot of different things now. Lowering class sizes to facilitate social distancing. Establishing clear expectations for staff, families, students, et cetera, in the environment that we're living in. There was a lot of concern about teacher attendance. So how are we going to deal with absences if a teacher has to go out and our sub's going to be readily available, those things that Mr. Stacy's office is working with. Teachers wanted to make sure they were going to have the support and time to prepare for whatever models we establish. And they wanted a quick development and communication of a plan. So these are those areas where we had common ground, where those sort of two differing groups of folks said, whatever we do, we got to do these things. So I'm going to turn it back over to Natalie because she did the lion's share of the work with the task force here, and let her talk to you about those models.
So based on the feedback from our stakeholder groups, we have developed reentry plans, again, like I said, across grade bands. To begin with, we'll look at our elementary options. For students in kindergarten through grade 5, we're going to offer families, or we are suggesting that we offer families 2 options for reentry in the fall. That would be the family model and the home-based model. Guardians of students will have the opportunity to select which of these choices they would think is best for their family and their children this summer. We're going to present information about both tonight. And we'll begin with the family model first. So our goal in the family model was twofold. We wanted to protect students and staff members' health while also maximizing instructional time and support, as Dr. Little described in the beginning. In this model, instructional time is maximized with all students attending school each day during scheduled school hours. In addition, we believe that as our community continues to reopen and as parents and guardians return to work, that this model best supports the homeschool partnerships that we have been developing while also effectively addressing student growth academically and socially. The family model treats homerooms or homeroom classes like families, and as a part of that family, students will remain in one classroom throughout the school day, with the exception of recess and other outdoor instruction. Students are not required to practice social distancing or wearing face coverings while in that family model classroom. This means that related arts teachers and other support staff teachers will come to students' family model classrooms to conduct their course or to take students outside. It also means that visiting teachers like related arts teachers and support staff teachers will wear personal protective equipment like face masks during those class experiences. Students will enjoy recess opportunities with their classmates only, and schools will serve breakfast and lunch in the classroom setting. In the family model, students will have learning and social experiences listed on the screen. This includes, of course, English language arts, math, science, and social studies. They will also have multiple recess breaks and frequent movement breaks throughout the day, as well as opportunities for social and emotional learning. In addition, if a teacher team teaches across multiple sets of students, teachers will move between classrooms and students will remain in their homeroom class. For instance, this is how our immersion programs in elementary school would function. Again, our adult staff would be wearing PPE or personal protective equipment if they were to move classrooms. So as we were planning the family model option, we specifically wanted to address how support services would be given to children as they need. These services include special education, gifted and talented, school counseling, response to intervention, English as a second language, and other school-specific supports. We are suggesting that schools use both a push-in and a pull-out model to provide these services to children. In both of these, whether it's a push-in or a pull-out, our teachers will be wearing personal protective equipment. And I did want to kind of name some of what those models could look like. So if teachers are pushing into a family model classroom, they would be working with a small group while in the class with their homeroom teacher, and they would be wearing PPE at the time. You might also have a staff member come to a class and pull an individual student out to do individual conferring. Again, the staff would be wearing PPE. The staff might also pull a small group of children from the same homeroom class or family model classroom. Again, the staff would be wearing PPE. And finally, if needed, staff may pull children from multiple classrooms, but in cases of that, both the staff and students would be wearing personal protective equipment, and they would be practicing social distancing as much as possible. So in order to support this family model option, we also review the start and stop time for the school day. So typically in elementary schools in the past, school started around 7:40 a.m. in most sites and ended at 2:20 p.m. Please note that our suggested start and stop time for the coming school year will be different. We are suggesting that elementary schools start at 7:50 a.m. and end at 2 p.m. We believe this slightly shortened day will allow schools to stagger both entry into the building as well as dismissal from the building in the best way possible to keep children and staff safe. In order to help young children practice these procedures for social distancing and the staggered entry and dismissal, Our team wanted to recommend that elementary students should transition back into school that first week in an incremental fashion. So what this means as a whole school, like in the whole school context, is that half of the student body would come on days 1 and 2. The second half of the school would come days 3 and 4, and then all children would be there on day 5. Each school would provide specifics to guardians regarding the start date for their specific children or family. So from a teacher's perspective, though, this means that half of his or her class would be there again on day 1 and 2, the other half there on days 3 and 4, with the full class there on day 5.
Is that just the first week, or that's ongoing?
Just the first week.
Okay.
So student and staff safety was vitally important in our planning, and we believe it should be kept paramount as we continue to make decisions. So we wanted to make sure you understood that we were going to be using and creating guidance from the CDC and from DHEC, as well as our district's operations and human resources departments, to address instances when a student or staff member were to test positive for COVID-19. In these cases, though, instruction will not stop. We will continue to provide quality learning experiences for our children in a distance learning format during any time of quarantine. Because of that last statement, I want to make sure I explain to you the next thing. So distance learning Wednesdays. In our end-of-year work plan reviews with administrative teams and school leadership teams, they repeatedly mentioned how collaborative and resilient both our educators and students were during the spring closure. But the other kind of theme in the conversation has been how hard it has been for our teachers to brainstorm, design, and execute distance learning in such a tight turnaround. So to ensure that quality instruction for all children, both in the face-to-face and distance learning environment, our team believes it's critical to provide teachers with time to collaborate and time to plan engaging experiences for children around new learning. This is why we are advocating for elementary teachers to have distance learning days every other week. The distance learning Wednesdays ensure educators have time to collaborate, plan, and design learning experiences that support our children in becoming effective communicators, collaborators, creators, and critical thinkers. These Wednesdays will also give educators consistent access to professional learning that they need to develop technical and adaptive skills. And finally, distance learning Wednesdays will give them time to engage in parent conferences so that we can figure out the supports they need both in school and out of school. So as I mentioned at the beginning, there is also a home-based model. And in the home-based model, instruction will be provided virtually through a variety of formats with accountability measures in place for progress monitoring and academic growth. We will also be providing virtual support services and social emotional learning supports in a variety of formats such as telephone calls, emails, and virtual platform meetings like Zoom or Google Hangout. So for students in grades 6 through 12, we will offer 2 options for reentry in the fall: the AB hybrid schedule and a virtual instruction model. Guardians of students, again, will have the opportunity to select which of these schedules best fits their family and their children later this summer. We will present information about both, and we will start with the hybrid schedule. So in a hybrid schedule model, students will be assigned to either a cohort A group or a cohort B group to support social distancing. For students, this means that they will have 2 days of face-to-face instruction and 3 days of virtual learning each week. In the face-to-face instructions, teachers will still be using our district's instructional model, which we call the student engagement model. On those face-to-face days, they will still have mini lessons, they still will have small group differentiated instruction, and they still will engage in individual conferring. On virtual days, educators will use structures that empower children to be leaders of their own learning. Content and learning on virtual days will be a continuation of what they had done in the face-to-face environment previously. To support student growth, schools will schedule virtual opportunities for students to work with their teachers in real time to address academic and social needs. In addition, teachers will design and schedule virtual peer collaboration opportunities for students to continue their work in a group setting. So at the middle level, the AB hybrid schedule will have 7 periods each day when students are in a face-to-face group. Please note that the start and stop time for middle school has been adjusted for the 2021 school year as well. Currently, our middle schools start, like this year, our middle schools started at 8:05 typically and ended around 3:30. For next year, we are recommending that middle school start at 9 a.m. and end at 4:15 p.m. From the student perspective, the AB hybrid schedule provides them with a well-rounded middle school experience. Each student has a rich course of study that includes 4 core classes, 2 exploratory classes, and 1 advocacy period. To aid in the social distancing aspects, the team built in 10-minute transition times between classes and is recommending staggered class changes. This time period presents schools with the opportunity to design the safest transition plan possible at each grade band. All periods in this schedule will be 55 minutes, with the exception of period 2, which was made longer for non-instructional class tasks like ordering lunch. From the teacher perspective, core teachers will teach 4 classes and have 2 dedicated periods, 1 for planning and 1 for virtual support of students. Exploratory teachers will have 5 classes and provide support to their virtual day cohort when they are not with students in a face-to-face setting. Specialized programs and supports, again in this model, will be still possible. Students who receive response to intervention, English as a second language, or special education supports will still have access to these services on face-to-face and virtual days. Students who need this added layer of intervention may attend pull-out services for special ed, response to intervention, or ESOL in lieu of one of their exploratory classes, or they may be eligible for additional supports. This allows all children to have at least 1 exploratory class. Furthermore, students will experience differentiation through accelerated coursework like they always have, and immersion students will continue to take a language and passport class under this model. Lastly, the advocacy period and lunch would be combined. This allows for more face-to-face instructional time when students are in the building, while providing social and emotional support, as well as time for children to decompress with their peers in the advocacy setting. So for middle school, secondary teachers as a whole, we are recommending virtual learning Wednesdays. Like the elementary model plan, these same teachers need time to provide virtual student supports, to collaborate and plan engaging student experiences, and to engage in rich professional learning. For secondary teachers in particular, we felt like this was important because they are changing from a primarily face-to-face instructional model to one that is hybrid. These Wednesdays would occur each week. We believe that these virtual learning Wednesdays ensure educators have the quality time they need to collaborate with one another to design hybrid learning experiences and supports that empower children to be effective communicators, collaborators, creators, and critical thinkers. In addition, these Wednesdays give educators consistent access to the professional learning they will need to develop the technical and adaptive skills for hybrid and virtual learning. So in order to support all students and families in a hybrid environment as described, our team is recommending that students have multiple contacts from school staff during the 3 virtual days, easing parents' concern if their child is at home. Each day, teachers will have a dedicated period where they will be available for virtual office hours. This allows educators to provide instructional support and services to a cohort of students attending school that day in a virtual setting. In addition, students who need additional interventions will be given the supplemental support in the virtual setting, and school counselors and advocacy teachers may meet with children through virtual meetings. Students with siblings in the same school or in the same attendance area, including children in blended families, will be placed in the same cohort to ease childcare, transportation, and scheduling concerns. Lastly, we are investigating community partnerships that may provide relief for parents regarding childcare concerns. So before we dig into the student perspective of the high school schedule, I wanted you to note again the schedule time change for next year. This past year, our high schools typically started school around 8:20 a.m. and they would end around 3:30 p.m. For the 2020-21 school year, the draft team recommends that high schools start at 9 a.m. and end at 3:50 p.m. Additionally, the high school schedule has a similar structure to the middle school in that there are 2 cohorts or groups in which students could be scheduled. In the AB hybrid schedule for high school, students will typically take around 6 to 8 credits over the course of the year, depending on graduation requirements. Students who travel to LTC or a center of advanced study, we're advising that they stay at those schools for the entire day if possible. We're also advising that course offerings remain the same with the addition of some 100% virtual options. And these course offerings will still include international baccalaureate, advanced placement, and dual enrollment options that we have always had. To support families in transitioning to this model, again, we will ensure that siblings and individuals in the same household will be scheduled in the same cohort. This includes siblings that may go to a feeder middle school. So from the teacher perspective, in a high school, teachers would teach around 60 to 90 students per semester. Each group that they see in the face-to-face sitting would have around 10 to 16 students physically in the classroom. On Wednesdays, all students, again, would be virtual like in the middle school, and teachers would host virtual office hours and support sessions on those Wednesdays. In addition, they would have time for collaborative planning and professional learning on virtual platforms. On Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, teachers will have 75 minutes dedicated for virtual office hours for planning and virtual support of students. Some teachers may teach 100% virtually in this model, depending on the course offering and the number of student requests that we have for that. Something that I was very excited about and wanted to make sure was shared is that under this schedule, our children will still have access to a world-class career and technology education experience at Lexington Technology Center. The goal of this coursework will continue to be hands-on learning with real-life application. So the LTC will leverage a model that maximizes in-person hands-on learning so that students acquire the career-specific skills they need alongside mastering course content. Students who select to take courses at LTC will still have that option to earn career credits or certifications. Because some of these certifications are governed by outside agencies, the LTC will use the requirements of the certification to determine the schedule for that particular course. To support students in their endeavors to take courses at Lexington Technology Center, our draft team is proposing that core classes be offered to LTC for traveling students. Students that attend Lexington High School would continue to take their core classes at their home school. As a result of this change, the LTC will manage schedule conflicts and needs on a case-by-case basis should students have specialized coursework they need to complete for graduation. In addition, transportation will be provided to the LTC. However, we are recommending that the routes between instructional blocks be limited or eliminated when possible. Students will still have the option to drive or to be dropped off and picked up as they always have in the past. So in closing around the AB hybrid schedule, I just wanted to highlight 2 things. First, the schedule addresses safety. It maximizes exposure by creating half occupancy in the building and classes each day. And it minimizes transitions and allows ample time for students to transition between classes. Additionally, staff may have atypical duties, which includes bathroom and hallway supervision, behavior coaching, and extra support to students as needed. As with the other models presented tonight, the district will work with local medical professionals, the CDC, and DHEC to determine best safety protocols for entering, transitioning, and exiting the school, as well as the use of personal protective equipment. Second, the plan intentionally addresses students' need for social and emotional support. Students are provided a social and emotional support class each day that they are on campus through an advocacy period. In addition, teachers of this advocacy period will also provide a regular point of contact for families regarding check-ins and questions. So the virtual instruction option for families is the second opportunity or choice that a family could make. In the 100% virtual option, instruction will be provided through a variety of formats with accountability measures in place to ensure progress monitoring and student growth. Virtual support services and social emotional learning support will also be provided through a variety of formats like telephone calls, emails, and virtual platform meetings like Zoom and Google Hangout. So before I ended tonight, I would be remiss not to thank my team that I worked with over the past couple of weeks to develop these schedules. I want to thank the principals, assistant principals, and school staff listed here that served as our drafting team for the schedule options. I'm going to ask them to stand up if they'd like to, so that we can give them a round of applause for all of the hard work that they did. And when I say hours, it was hours and hours of study on their own, the different entry plans, as well as the work that I kind of harangued them to do when we met through Zoom and other meetings. So they did an amazing job in taking this feedback from stakeholder groups to ensure that our options met the needs of our children, staff, and families. Specifically, the drafting team correlated the stakeholder feedback with our options. By intentionally using this feedback to clarify and revise our plans, we are confident that school schedule options that we presented to you tonight ensure the safety and security of our students and staff, maximize learning experiences for children, and provide social and emotional supports that all students need while staying true to our mission and vision as a district. We could not have refined and produced these options without the support and work of the professionals listed here. We are definitely stronger together. So, at this time, if you have questions, I'd be glad to help.
I just want to say thank you. I know a lot of work went into that. Wow, I'm not even sure what questions I have. But I do know that I know I will be bombarded with questions probably as soon as I leave here. I have for the last couple of weeks and all the way up until when I pull in the parking lot. Who do people call or email that would actually have some answers for them?
So we are developing a website that will go live right after this meeting with the options and choices. And on that website, they will list the people that they need to contact should they have questions. So it'll all be on that website that'll be connected to the lexington1.net site.
Okay, thank y'all.
And you may already have this plan for that website, but I think it would be very helpful to, a little bit like when we have like a building plan or a property purchase, maybe start compiling the FAQs.
Yes.
And continually update those, that way, because otherwise you'll get 9 million of the same question.
Right.
And like Ms. Garris, this is what I've been asked about for the last 6 weeks. And I mean, I can't imagine how many hours y'all spent on this, because you basically just, I've told people, I think they like put everything on the table and just pick pieces and parts and I mean, y'all really crafted an entirely new school model. And so thank you very much for the time that you put into this. Thank you.
One note, just that, just to be clear about what our intention is for the year. As the reality changes, so will this plan also be flexible. So I think our number one goal and our number one hope is that we're going back to school with no social distancing issues whatsoever. I mean, I think that is certainly our hope. And perhaps, if treatment or a vaccine or whatever else is generated this year, maybe that's a possibility. But what we are really looking at is this to be, as Dr. Talley said earlier, a nimble plan. So if the reality changes, and let's say it maybe doesn't change for the good, then maybe we are going to be much better prepared this year to engage in a virtual or distance learning environment. And our commitment to our community is that the learning that you experienced in the fourth quarter of last year is not the same type of learning that you're going to experience distance-wise or virtually this year. Number one, we've invested heavily in time for our teachers to prepare, and I cannot tell you how important that is. We have to give our teachers time to think through this. I have told people that next year, every teacher in our district is a first-year teacher because they're doing things next year they've never done before, and we're going to have to respect that and provide these incredible professionals with the time they need to be successful. At the same time, we have to continue again to be nimble, and we have to ensure that if we are to go to a virtual learning environment for any length of time, say you have to shut down a school for 2 to 5 days, say there's a quarantine or something along those lines, or the second wave and we have a much larger issue in the fall than we do today, any of those issues, we are going to be better prepared to switch to those virtual and distance learning environments. And again, last year our goal was to survive the fourth quarter. We were dealing with something we had never dealt with before, and we had 72 hours to prepare. This year it's about thriving. This year it's about creating dynamic learning experiences. And this year it's about our students and our teachers finding incredible amounts of success and advancing. It's not just about let's hold what we've got and let's make it through the end of the year because we know we're dealing with all these things. Now it's about how do we best support our students as it moves forward, because we could be in this model. I mean, we have 2 doctors here. We could be in this model 12 months. We could be in this model 18 months, 24 months, 6 months, whatever it may look like. But again, our goal is
6.
What's that?
I vote 6.
Yeah, me too. I vote 6 too. But just knowing that there's a lot of different ways this thing could go, and we need to be prepared for any of them. And I think our model does that, and we're going to have to switch back and forth. We may have to switch back and forth in those kinds of things. But the last thing I want to say as to what Dr. Smith talked about and stressed throughout our thing, we will be working to create the absolute best way to minimize exposure to our teachers, our staff, and our students, and how that works, and who needs to be in PPE and who doesn't. At this moment, we don't necessarily believe that our students in the classroom will be wearing masks. I know that's a hot topic, and I wanted to announce that. I don't believe that's going to be in our model, but there may be some use of PPE when we talk about transition and moving throughout the building and those kinds of things. But so we're trying to create this opportunity for our young people and our teachers, the adults in our building, that everyone can be safe, but that we can also provide a dynamic learning environment so that they can be successful.
I think from a medical perspective, we just have to acknowledge we don't know. I wish I could sit here and tell you we know what the future looks like and what this viral infection is going to do. We don't. We're better than we were 3 months ago. We'll be better 3 months from now. But we don't know. What I do know is that there's probably not a person in this room who has not cried over the past 3 months. There's probably not a person watching this right now who has not cried. A parent who has been a foster parent, a grandparent who has been cast into a role of teacher, a teacher who has been cast into a role of completely figuring out their job and how to do it. And if you don't know that teaching is a calling, I'm here to tell you it is, because I have had several sitting on my front porch crying because they can't see their kids. So it's very real. On the flip side, we see the kids cry. They come through my office, and no more do they say, I don't want to go to school. They say, how can I go to school? I don't care what I have to wear. I will go to school. We didn't know how this thing was going to start. with coronavirus. We didn't know if we're dealing with the flu or if we're dealing with Ebola. We needed time to determine that. We got a little better handle. In-office testing will make a huge difference. Vaccination will make a tremendous difference. And both of those are obviously in the pipeline. I think this plan makes the best of a bad situation at the end of the day. This is, from a medical perspective, it acknowledges the fact that you are not going to get a K through 5 to socially distance or wear a mask. You will not. Trust me, I see plenty of them all day. It will not happen. But it also acknowledges that there is a mental wellness side to the social experience a child has. And that starts very early, but it's most important 6th grade and up. And so I think just by allowing the face-to-face interaction as much as we can, I'd love to see more days. But, you know, obviously there are so many time constraints and constrictions and everything else that have to go into play, and you have to honor the fact that teachers have to have time to prepare. And so I think this plan is the best of the bad situation. It's aggressive while conservative at the same time. And so appreciate the work all of you have done, and certainly look forward to August 18th.
I was going to ask one more question. So I think for the first time that I can recall, it looks like our middle schools and high schools, their schedules will be synced up. Will that open the door for, say, like for families that choose 100% virtual instruction, that there could be students from River Bluff and Lexington and Gilbert with the same teacher? I mean, it seems like you'll be able to consolidate some resources with this, since everybody's got the same, basically, block schedule. Is that part of your conversations?
So yes, we are developing plans in terms of what a virtual academy would look like should families choose to go 100% virtual. And those FTE allotments are really going to depend on the number of requests that we have in those sections. So high school in particular is a challenge because there are so many options that children can choose in terms of scheduling. But our team is, our scheduling team and the IT department are fantastic, and we're working through ways to make that happen for kids.
Also note, we have you may have said this earlier, but we have a survey going out by the end of this week where we will be asking families if they are interested in the 100% virtual option. And so we're going to be collecting that data as soon as we can, and being able to turn that around then into the planning of what that ultimately looks like. But to your point, it's possible that you would have students from across the district in one virtual classroom with the particular teacher.
For the survey, and I know the survey is just gauging interest, but once a family chooses virtual, they're virtual through the school year, right? They can't.
Well, that was some of our initial conversations, but I think it really depends on the number of families who are interested in a virtual option, and I think it also depended upon what happens. Today, the breaking news today was that Dr. Fauci said he's cautiously optimistic that a vaccine will be developed in early 2021. So if something like that were to happen, we would need to change gears if our reality changes. So I don't want to sit here and tell you that it would not be for the year, and perhaps you need to plan for it to be for the year, and you think about it that way. But we also want to understand that we could have any number of families who are infected by this, and we're trying to be as flexible as we can.
So I have a question. Will the teachers be working from school or home on virtual learning days?
They'll be working from school on virtual learning days.
Okay. Are we going to be taking temperature of the kids coming into school?
That's part of the strategies we have not yet identified. That's where we're talking about transition periods and the safety procedures associated with those transition periods.
Okay. And so have you gotten as far as the buses and at what % capacity they'll be operating? So
DHEC has provided us feedback on that. That's why one of the things is you notice that the middle school and high school, their days are delayed, is because the elementary schedules, they can only run at 50% capacity. And so we're trying to make accommodations for the amount of time it will take to run morning buses, because you may have multiple elementary school routes, because you're only running your buses at 50%. And then you've got to make sure you have time for the high school and the middle school students to also do what they need to do on the buses. So one of the really great things is about, research around the adolescent brain indicates that they need to start school later. And so high schools have really always been slow to adjust to that. We've always done okay with it, sometime around mid 8 p.m. or something, or 8 a.m., but they used to start high schools at 7:30. And so having a 9 a.m. schedule actually works better for the teenage brain. And so we think actually that model will improve quite a bit, despite the reason why we got there. But yeah, we're trying to make accommodations for buses, trying to make accommodations for how long it's going to take kids to get to school. And so we're still finalizing those plans, but those were some of the acknowledgments. We acknowledge that it's going to take us longer to get elementary school students to school. So therefore, we're delaying middle school and high school days.
Okay, thank you.
Consideration for dual enrollment, what does that look like?
Well, our plan for dual enrollment is business as usual.
Okay.
We're going to certainly work with Palmetto College, USC Sumter under the umbrella of the Palmetto College, and work with them about how we can do dual enrollment. Dr. Smith, do you have anything to add about dual enrollment?
So right now, what we're working on is how do we schedule that in the context of the models that we presented tonight. But all the information that we have right now indicates that students will still have access to every class they've always had access to.
And as somebody who's looking to have a child go to college, I'm very excited about that fact. Just saying.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Smith. Thank you, Shane.
Again, I do want to reiterate, as of now, I believe we have our information will be going out. If you go to the electionin1.net website, we have a banner across the board there, but we'll be sending out that, there's what you saw tonight will be there. And then as soon as possible, the presentation by Dr. Smith and Dr. Phillips will also be up and available. So there's going to be a ton of information there, as well as a link for you to ask questions. So lots of miles to go before we sleep, but we're very excited about that. And as part of our work today, and Mr. Moody, I'd like to apologize that you're having to follow that. Oh, I'm completely off. I'm completely off. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. We do have some things to add about the reentry plan as it relates to student services, and I totally just blew off Mr. Caldwell, and I would like to apologize.
And then leave when I start. So a part of the reentry plan, of course, includes athletics, and I will tell you, as you look at that first slide, you'll see the word reentry is one word. Mary Beth Hill schooled me today that reentry is no longer hyphenated. I guess we've used it so often in our vernacular now that it's become one word. But I do want to talk very briefly about our athletic reentry plan that actually has already begun. There we go. And I want to start with a foundational statement. I borrowed some of this language from the High School League, and I think Lexington 1 adheres to that also, and that is that the league and the school district believes that it is essential to the physical and mental well-being of students to return to physical activity and athletic competition. To kind of frame that, to give you an idea of how involved our students are, we have approximately, or at the end of the 1920 school year, we had about 7,800 students in grades 9 through 12. Of those 7,800, about 3,500 of those students participated in an athletic activity. That's like 45% of the high school students participated in some athletic opportunity. So when we shut it down in the spring, of course, we didn't shut down all 3,500 by shutting down the spring activities, but almost half of our students are currently engaged. So this has a huge impact on our students that we had to end the year without athletics and the prospect of not being able to have athletics at the beginning of the year. I will tell you that question is still under consideration. We're not really sure what athletic competition is going to look like, if it's going to look like anything in the fall. But we have begun the reentry plan, and I wanted to share that with you briefly tonight. Again, as Natalie, Dr. Smith mentioned several times the word safety. Well, safety first, of course, is the overarching goal of this reentry plan, to keep our student athletes, our coaches, our trainers, and any other staff members involved. Safety comes before anything else. Back in late April, early May, David Bennett began working with our high school athletic directors and trainers. And let me say this, anybody who knows me knows that I've made a career out of being surrounded or being able to surround myself with people who are much smarter than me. That has never been more evident than through this process, because we've had the work of Coach Bennett, the high school athletic directors, high school administrators, the trainers, Amy Wood, who is absolutely a phenomenal resource, Matt McCormick and Clark Cooper in our office have done the heavy lifting on this plan. So I want you to know that first and foremost. Without those folks' foresight and intelligence and expertise, we probably would not have this plan in place. But at any rate, in anticipation that the high school league would have some plan, we began planning ahead of that. And in late May, the high school league did submit and disseminate to the districts a 3-phase plan to return to athletics in the fall. That really didn't tell us what to do. It kind of guided our thinking, because we already were, we already had a plan in place, and so we were glad to see that what we had developed was kind of in line with what the high school league said. So from that point, we continued to get feedback from the athletic directors, the trainers, the school and district administrators, and phase 1 of a 3-phase entry plan actually began last Monday, June 15th. Now, within that plan of 3 phases, we have phases within phase 1. And week 1, which was last week, we invited the fall sport athletes back on campus. That's football, volleyball, cross country, those type. And I want to tell you that, and of course, in week 2, that'll be the winter sport athletes. Week 2 started yesterday, so that's mainly basketball and wrestling. And then week 3, which will start next week, will be the spring sports, baseball, softball, golf, those type things. That's not to imply that phase 1 will be over in 3 weeks, but we wanted to be slow and deliberate in reacclimating the kids back onto campus. The coaches are emphasizing strength and conditioning workouts over skill development. One thing that we have to realize and accept is that students probably deconditioned over the break. And so we have to, the weather last week was pretty kind to us and kind to the athletes. This week, not so much. So we have to be sure that we go slow and steady, and as we reacclimate those students into the strength and conditioning workouts. And I also want to stress that participation of the athletes and participation of the coaches is completely voluntary. If they, for some reason, for any reason at all, feel like it's not in their best interest to participate at this time, they're not going to be made to do that, and there's no penalty, no negative consequence for that. We have had a few athletes that have decided it is not in their best interest. To my knowledge, Coach Bennett, I don't think we've had any adults at this point that have chosen not to participate. But if for some reason they chose to, that is certainly their choice. So again, this is completely voluntary. Some of the health and safety measures that we are taking as the students arrive on campus each day, there will be temperature checks and health screenings that are performed daily. So the way that works, the trainers screen themselves and the coaches, and then the coaches screen the players each day. And the screening involves a temperature check, and it also involves a series of questions. And if they have a temperature of over 100 or more, or they answer yes to some of the questions, then we have a process in place. If they have a temperature of 100 or more, we'll sit them down for 10 minutes, check it again. If it's lower than 100, they're able to participate. If not, then they have to call home or go home for that day. The students are masked when they're not involved in an activity, which basically means they're masked when they arrive to campus, and they're masked when they leave campus. But when they're there doing the physical activity, they're certainly not going to be masked. Coaches, however, should be masked at all times. We are maintaining 6 feet of distance between the participants and 12 feet of distance when working out. So that becomes very challenging. And as our numbers grow this week and next week, That becomes even more challenging because we have a limited amount of space with which to work with all of these athletes. The weight equipment can be used, and when it says clean between each group, I want to stress that the students can go into the weight room. Again, they are 12 feet apart, but they're not sharing equipment. So if they're working with kettlebells or they're working with dumbbells, they will work with those by themselves. And when that group of 10 leaves and the next group comes in, but in between that transition, all of that will be sanitized. So they can't share any of the weight equipment. There's no more than 10 people allowed in any activity in any group, and that's 10 people including the coaches. So athletes and coaches, no more than 10 in a group. The groups stay together, kind of like the family model. Those groups stay together during the entire practice, and they're only allowed in one area at a time. And this probably was the most challenging because we can only have 10 people on a football field. Now, in my mind, when I first heard that, well, we'll take a fence, Coach Bennett, and we'll put it down the 50-yard line, and we can turn one football field into two. And the high school league was very clear, no, you won't. So 10 people on any facility at one time. So in one gym, in one weight room, on one football field. So again, that's a challenge, and it's getting more challenging as we have more students come onto campus. The first 10 weeks, the first 10 days of the practices, and we are approaching day 10. There's no balls, no other equipment being used. On day 11, a volleyball player can use a volleyball, but only she can use the volleyball herself and maybe do sets against a wall. Or a coach can throw batting practice to a batter with no catcher. And once that's over, those balls are sanitized, and then the next batter comes in, and they're not sharing bats, they're not sharing helmets, they're not sharing gloves. So it's a very articulated plan keeping the safety first. Locker rooms and offices are not being used during this phase 1. So the students and the coaches are expected to come to campus ready to participate. There's limited restroom access. Basically, it's every other stall that we're using to try to keep that social distancing. We're not allowing any personal contact, no huddles, no handshaking, no high-fiving, none of that's allowed. The participants bring their own water bottles. They can't share that. If they don't have water bottles, we have water available for them. So again, we're trying to cut out the commingling as much as possible. Just to give you an idea, the first week, which ended last Friday, we had approximately 964 athletes that participated. And that's in the fall sports. We're adding to that this week. I don't know what those numbers are, but it's certainly going to be well over 1,000. Again, week 2, which is the week we're in, started with the winter sports. And the middle schools were delayed. We wanted to be sure that we had, first of all, our processes down at the high school level to be sure that we were keeping the kids and the adults as safe as possible. And we wanted to be sure we had the proper equipment with the no contact thermometers and that sort of thing. So they will be starting next week or maybe the first week of July. And that is, I tried to be as brief as possible, but I will certainly answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yes, sir.
Any thought being given to the arts, marching band, chorus, orchestra?
There is, and I think a group is working on that. That's kind of away from student services, but I did share with them what our reentry plan was, and I think they're using that as a template to start that.
Yes, sir, and I will be meeting with that planning team, I believe, tomorrow. We have the fine arts group coming in tomorrow. As you know, having a band kid in the family, this has been quite the conversational piece at the house, and we're trying to figure out how best to do that. One of the great challenges of marching band and really chorus as well is that when you are playing that musical instrument, you are using your breath, you're using, I don't want to gross out the room, but you're using a lot of
Spit.
Bodily fluids to play that musical instrument. And there's a lot of force behind that, and so there's a lot of concern about what that might look like. But we're going to do all we can to get band and chorus up and running and do so in the best possible situation. But there's also some coming out shortly. There will be some, I saw on the Accelerate Ed plan today, they've got other, people are rolling out other plans about that. But our plan, we're going to meet tomorrow with that and kind of find out where we are. But we need those kids playing. I mean, there's no substitute for practice. And, you know, you'll see a student who goes, well, I mean, you saw this all the time. In August, their noise, it sounds like they're killing, you know, an animal. And then by December, they're playing music. Well, they've done that because they've got significant practice time between August and December. And so we want to maintain that as much as we can.
So we're involving some folks in the band world and chorus and orchestra to help.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
They've been part of the planning process, all our band directors and all those folks.
That's a great quote. I won't take up a lot of time, but during World War II, somebody asked Winston Churchill, well, why don't we stop funding the arts, you know, toward the war effort? And his answer was, well, what are we fighting for? So let's don't forget about the arts. I think
Absolutely.
they're as important as anything else we do.
Agreed.
Any other questions I can answer for you? Very good, thank you.
Mr. Caldwell, I'd like to, again, apologize for overlooking you, and I appreciate so much, Coach, and your work on making this happen. Thank you very much for all of your efforts. All right, next on our list is we have Mr. Will Moody. Again, Mr. Moody, I apologize for you having to follow such a distinguished and panel of educators ahead of you, but I know you will represent yourself and Gilbert Elementary School well. But if you'll recall, last board meeting, we had Centerville Elementary School present the blue and orange of Centerville Elementary School. And today, Mr. Moody would like to talk about changes at Gilbert Elementary School and how that's going to look. Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Dr. Little. And the reentry plan is a tough act to follow, so I'll do my best here. And I was thinking on the way over here, I have the unique distinction of being the last principal of Gilbert Primary School and the first principal of the new Gilbert Elementary School. So that's exciting. And I'm going to tell you about some of the changes on the horizon for our school. This is the architect's rendering of what the front of our school will look like when the renovations are complete. And we're excited the new signage and some architectural elements there will make it more obvious where the front of our school is and help us welcome visitors when they come in. And our improvements are well underway. They jumped on the school and the campus the minute teachers were gone for the summer. The most visible and obvious changes will be a reconfigured car line in front and a bus lane in the back, which helps give us a more efficient flow of traffic on the campus while keeping everybody safe. But we've got lots of improvements, and some of these are already complete, and we're excited. I do want to point out that we worked with members of our special education team to select new playground equipment that is inclusive and accessible to students with disabilities. So we're very excited to make our main playground accessible to all children. A few fast facts here. We will continue to serve 3-year-olds through 5th grade, and we will continue to be a Title I school. We'll have about 816 students, which is a little smaller than what we were as Gilbert Primary, and we'll have about 117 staff members. That includes certified and support staff. Our school community, our PTO, our SIC, they're all very excited about our new logo that you can see here, and I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the elements in the logo. You can see we're committed to the red and black color scheme that's typical of Gilbert. We've added the block G in the middle, which we feel like strengthens our identity as a Gilbert community school, shows alignment with Gilbert Middle School and Gilbert High School. And the feather in the background is meant to show a connection to the Gilbert High School Indians and the GMS Warriors. So we're very excited about that. New brand for our school. You can see our mission there is to empower students by developing the whole child through academics and leadership. And our vision is growing, learning, leading together. And we believe that the word together captures what Gilbert is all about. Two major initiatives that we're excited about for 2020, 2021, and I'm glad Mr. Oswald mentioned the arts, because arts integration or arts integrated instruction is something that I'm very passionate about. And we actually started this initiative this current school year, and we'll grow that this year. And also AVID. I worked at an AVID school previously, and I've seen that work with teachers and students. I'll be happy to give you more information about that if you'd like, but what's most important about both of these initiatives, they're both grounded in research-based best practices, but more importantly than that, they open up multiple pathways to success for every child, and we feel that both of these directly support the Lexington One mission and vision, and that's going to be some exciting things for you to come out and see. We hope you will. Like all Lexington One schools, we'll continue to provide world-class learning experiences, and I've listed a few of those here. You can see our arts integration initiative referenced again there, along with AVID across grade levels. We're excited to see our Spanish immersion program grow from kindergarten all the way through the 5th grade, and we'll continue with strong social emotional instruction that we have currently at Gilbert Primary.
So this is year 6 of your immersion program? Is that what you're saying? Like 5th grade class will be the...
Well, currently, we're only K through 2, so now we're adding grades 3, 4, and 5. Yes, sir. And then our major areas of focus for next school year, student engagement, that's where AVID and arts integration, along with the workshop model and reading, writing, and math fall under. We'll focus on culture and community. We have a great community at Gilbert Primary and in the Gilbert community itself. But as we rebuild a school family with new staff members from Gilbert Elementary School and students that are coming back to us from Gilbert Elementary, that will be just a big focus. We want to continue to have that warm, welcoming, inclusive family environment that we have, and then the continuous improvement of our learning environment. And that's me. That's quick. We'd love for you to come visit next year and see all the changes. Any questions for me?
Nicely
right.
done, Mr. Moody. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. And Madam Chair, with Mr. Salter's not here tonight, I think it'd be best if we we'll do an operations update at our July meeting, and we'll kind of capture all of that, especially with the lateness of the hour and him not being here, if that's okay. It's okay with him. I've already checked, and so that concludes my report.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Little.